Hello everybody, today I am driving the brand spanking new Audi S4. Unless you've been living under a rock for the last couple of months, there's one pretty big thing about the new Audi S cars: the engines. You see, for the European markets, they are no longer petrol powered. The heart of this car is a 3-litre V6 turbocharged diesel unit with a 48 volt mild hybrid system. Now that combination produces 347 PS and 700 newton meters of torque, or to put it in old money, just over 500 pound-foot. Now your most immediate question is almost certainly going to be, does it go? Well, I can answer that one very easily. Oh yes, it bloody goes. Crikey! It's not slow. It's not slow at all. Now, curiously, I thought that mild hybrid system might have eliminated the turbo lag you'd often associate with a powerful diesel, but it hasn't. It is still there, and if you're at very low RPM, say pulling away and so on, you can catch the engine out. It's also not the most sonorous thing, although it doesn't sound bad. It just sounds alright. It maybe sounds like a slightly subdued version of Sebulba's Pod Racer. However, there's absolutely no doubting whatsoever its ability to shove this relatively heavy car down the road. I've very little experience in the pre-facelift cars, barring a very brief drive in an RS4, but I have to say, this thing is really impressive. The first thing that amazed me is just how nice this interior is. This car is a brilliant demonstration of the importance of specification in German cars. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about the new A4 range and some of the things that are changing, I recommend you watch the video I did on the A435 TFSI earlier today, which will have been released by the time this comes out. There's a couple of things happening which are fairly significant for all large car manufacturers, and I discussed that in that video. In terms of the S4, one thing to note is the fact that the S4 is going to be gaining trim levels. So no longer do you just have S4, there's now going to be S4, S4 Black Edition, and S4 Vorsprung. The Vorsprung is the one to go for if you want all the toys. The base price of the new S4 is a fairly reasonable sounding 46 grand. The actual on-the-road cost of this exact one, a slightly less reasonable £58,000. How did Audi get there? Well, this car has added to it the Quattro Sports Differential for £1,400, the heads-up display for just over £1,000, the Driving Assistance Tour Package, which is another £1,200, 360-degree camera for £375, red brake calipers at £350, matrix LED headlights at £625, £195 for a storage package, multicoloured interior ambient lighting for £100, tow bar preparation £200, the much-loved dynamic steering at just over £1,000, adaptive dampers at £1,000, carbon inlays just shy of £500, more interior lighting for 135 quid, city assistance pack including park assist for 1250 quid, and your delivery fee, fuel and all that brings that up to close to £60,000. So it has to be said, for all of Audi's promises, options still are very much a thing. Now, in reality, I'm perhaps being a little bit harsh here, because the idea of the Vorsprung version of the car is to give you a whole host of things for a better price. However, the 4-sprung versions of these cars are not yet available, and so I think Audi have decided to simply send out a couple of fairly well-spec'd S4s. It's a pretty good looking car too. It's got a decent stance about it, it's reasonably angular, it doesn't stand out too much, not in this shaded Daytona grey, but it's a good looking car. The interior really is stunning, the carbon everywhere, the grey leather I don't even mind. I don't even hate the bit of Alcantara down here because I don't have to touch it that often. Oh.
Okay.
The Tour Pack there helps you know when somebody in a BMW X5 is trying to overtake you down a country lane and warns you that they are going beside you, so that certainly does its job. As with all cars in the A4 range now, you have Audi's virtual cockpit, which I do quite enjoy. It sadly also has this massive stuck-on screen, which I really don't enjoy and addressed in my other video. You can probably see on my little camera here the kind of stupidity of having that and that there. It really makes little to no sense to me. The interface is reasonably quick. I mean, it's okay, and when you're sat still, it's all right, and you can do things. But I still would much prefer a rotary controller here. I love this steering wheel, especially with the perforated leather here. This is very much like you'd find in an R8, that kind of thing. Driving position in here is great. You're sat nice and low down. These super sport seats are pretty comfortable as well, and everything is kind of where I want it to be. Curiously, these cars have an 8-speed Tiptronic versus the 7-speed S-Tronic, which you get in the lower models. Normally you'd expect the higher end car to get the dual clutch box, but unfortunately that was never going to happen. The diesel engine puts out so much torque that the S-Tronic just couldn't cope. And I've got to say, the 8-speed box is getting better. This isn't the best implementation of it that I've ever experienced, but it's fairly decent. Now, Audi are keen to point out that this car, thanks to its new engine and setup, does very well in the number stakes compared with its rivals. So it's better on CO2, better on fuel, etc, etc, etc. Sat still at traffic lights like we are here, you can hear that engine kind of pulsating through. However, that is somewhat artificial. If you set the car into comfort mode, that disappears and the engine is nearly inaudible. However, most unusually, even in dynamic mode, which I've been using for the most part, the car's actually pretty comfortable. It's something which shocked me with the A4 that I drove earlier, and actually is really impressing me now. Whoa. Once those turbos are lit though, this car picks up very quickly and really shoves you down the road. Long-time viewers of the channel may recall the B7 RS4 that's made a few appearances. That belongs to my buddy Darren, who's in the passenger seat. Well, this will match that car in the 0 to 62 dash, and it will beat it in the torque stakes by well over 50%. Now, of course, this doesn't rev out like the RS4. That car goes to about 8 and this one about 5. So if you demand a high revving engine from your sports car, look elsewhere. The car is returning over 45 miles to the gallon. That figure is probably a little higher than you would expect, but in the real world, I suspect this thing is going to do far better than particularly the Mercedes C43, which is one of its main rivals. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Audi is actually a lot heavier than either the Mercedes or the BMW, but when you drive it, it really doesn't feel it. Now, if this handles anything like the RS4 that I drove last year, and I have reason to believe that it does, you'll find that it's a very good, very competent car until you start to get into the really tight and twisty stuff. And that's where you have to kind of change your driving style to suit the car. The simple fact of the matter is that these are not light cars. They are on the large side, the Audi saloon being larger than its rivals from BMW or Mercedes, and of course having that big heavy diesel lump up front, all-wheel drive. That means it's just perhaps not quite as agile as those other cars, but it can fire itself out of a corner with frightening pace. And I have to say that the steering is far more impressive than you would possibly believe for something of this type. Although us petrol heads are going to lament Audi's decision to put a diesel engine in their S car, I am kind of beginning to understand it. driving this thing along these roads, which are probably not the best roads for it, it is absolutely stonking. It's also much more comfortable than I thought, which means that you really can daily drive it. The other thing that Audi want to do is to put a clearer gap between the S and the RS product lineup. Previous S cars have had some pretty cracking engines, including a number of great V6s and the fantastic V8. Now, as much as all of us love the idea of a beautiful, high-revving, naturally aspirated V8 as a daily driver, those of us that have actually experienced one will know how little fun the running costs are. Although this car is lacking the sonic drama of its forebears, you simply cannot deny the performance. And in this particular trim, this is an awfully nice place to spend quite a lot of time. On the interior front, what's drawing my attention the most, other than this stupid stuck on screen, is not even the lovely carbon fibre that's in here, but the most huge vent I've ever seen in my life. In fact, nearly the entire interior of this car seems to be one big vent. It's a bit weird really, but kind of cool I suppose. So today's video is not necessarily a comprehensive review of the new S4, because I simply cannot achieve that of this kind of car in such a short space of time. Think of this more as a first drive, and I have to say I was a little bit worried after yesterday's beautiful cars that the S4 would disappoint somewhat. I've been playing a lot recently with some fantastic old Audis, and the truth of the matter is that, things have changed a lot, and I thought this would be another car that I just wasn't that excited by. However, I am finding myself enjoying it a lot more than I thought I might. And so I'm hoping that I'll be able to bag one of these for a more extended test when I can try and investigate more how the car gets on in the real world, fuel economy, performance, and on some of my favourite back roads. But for now, the new S4 does get a thumbs up from me. The one thing I want to say to Audi though, not that they're going to listen to me, is that I hope that they can use this as an excuse to give the RS4 a properly special engine. Because my one criticism of that car is the fact that the V6 petrol, it's just not good enough. In the S4, I think this engine is an acceptable compromise. But the RS they promised me is going to be more uncompromising than ever before. And that I look forward to. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. We'll see you on the next one. Bye bye.